It was October 15th, 1941. The sky above Cologne, Germany, was quiet and dark, and the air was freezing cold. At 27,000 feet, Major Ulrich Vogel was alone in his Messerschmitt Bf-110 night fighter. He was one of Germany's best pilots, highly decorated, trusted, and feared by the enemy. His job was simple: stop the British bombers before they could destroy German factories and cities. Vogel was flying over the heart of the Rhineland, Germany's industrial zone. Below, British bombers were making their way toward the target. Most of them were large and slow, Lancasters or Halifaxes, easy to spot, easy to shoot down. Vogel's aircraft, the Bf-110, was one of the most powerful night fighters in the Luftwaffe. It had strong engines and advanced radar called the Liechtenstein. That radar was supposed to find any enemy plane in the dark. It gave pilots eyes in the night sky. Vogel trusted his plane. He trusted his radar. He had done this many times before. He stared at the small screen, scanning for targets. Then something strange happened. A tiny blip appeared on the radar. Small, fast, low, too small to be a bomber. And too quick, Vogel frowned. What was this? Maybe a British scout plane or a high-altitude intruder. Whatever it was, it didn't belong here. Without hesitation, he pushed the throttle forward. The engines roared louder as the plane picked up speed. The chase had begun. He was confident. There was no British plane that could outrun his Messerschmitt. He narrowed the gap, ready to attack. But suddenly, the signal on the radar vanished. No explosion. No crash. No sign of flak or a dogfight. Just gone. Confused, Vogel looked around. There was nothing in the sky except stars. No enemy, no bombers, no plane. He had no time to think. A split second later, blinding light flashed behind him. Cannon fire tore through his aircraft from above and behind. The body of his Bf-110 shuddered violently. Metal twisted. Alarms screamed. He fought the controls, trying to keep the plane from falling apart. But it was no use. He was going down, fast. As the ground rushed up toward him, one thought cut through the panic. He had been outflown, ambushed, by something invisible. The plane that had shot down Major Vogel wasn't made of strong metal. It wasn't loaded with machine guns or armor. It wasn't even built like other aircraft. It was made of wood. Wood, glue, and canvas. A British plane called the de Havilland Mosquito. The Germans would soon call it the Wooden Wonder, at first as a joke, but soon they would say it with fear. The Mosquito was fast, so fast that it didn't need guns to protect itself. It could simply outrun everything. And tonight, that wooden ghost had just sent one of Germany's best pilots crashing into the dark earth. The British Mosquito wasn't supposed to exist. At the start of the war, every expert in the Royal Air Force believed bombers had to be big, strong, and made of metal. They needed guns, armor, power, and most of all, they needed aluminum, the most important metal for building warplanes. But Britain had a problem. Aluminum was running low. Factories needed it. Tanks needed it. Planes needed it. And the war was using it all up. Every new aircraft built from metal drained more of this precious resource. That's when de Havilland, a private British aircraft company, made a strange and risky suggestion. What if we build a fast bomber? Out of wood? The idea sounded like madness. Wood? For warplanes? That was something from the past, from the days of biplanes and cloth wings. Not the modern age of air battles. Senior commanders laughed. They called it a toy, a death trap, a waste of time. But de Havilland's lead designer, Geoffrey de Havilland, didn't laugh. He believed in a simple idea. Speed is better than armor. Why carry heavy guns and metal plating, he argued, if you can fly so fast that nothing can catch you? If the plane was light, it could be faster. If it was fast, it could escape. And if it could escape, It didn't need guns or protection. He said, "Let the fighter planes fight. The Mosquito will outrun them all." So de Havilland built the first test version. The plane had two strong Rolls-Royce Merlin engines, the same type used in the famous Spitfire, but its body was made from layers of birch plywood and balsa wood. These layers were glued together in a sandwich shape, then molded into two halves. When the halves were sealed together, they created a smooth, strong, and surprisingly tough body. There were no metal rivets, no heavy joints, just carefully crafted wooden curves and glue. It looked more like fine furniture than a war machine. The result? A plane so fast, so light, and so sleek, it didn't need to fight enemy fighters. It simply flew past them. The British Air Ministry still didn't fully trust it. They said, "Okay, but just use it for reconnaissance. No weapons, no bombs." That decision saved the Mosquito. Because it was forced to stay light and clean, it became even faster, and it began flying deep into enemy territory, taking photos of German bases and factories. It came back every time, untouched, because the Germans couldn't catch it. That's when people started noticing. The Mosquito was unlike any other plane in the war. It didn't carry defensive guns. It didn't fly in big groups. It didn't need fighter escorts. It went alone. And it returned. Canada also saw its potential. With its massive forests and skilled woodworkers, Canada was the perfect place to help build more Mosquitoes. Across Toronto, Montreal, and other cities, small furniture shops and factories were retooled to build parts for the wooden wonder. Carpenters became aircraft builders. Tables and chairs were replaced by wings and fuselages. Canada turned trees into weapons. While the Germans trusted in metal, machines, and firepower, Britain and Canada were secretly building one of the deadliest planes of the war, out of plywood and glue, and it had just claimed its first kill in the skies over Cologne. By the middle of 1942, the de Havilland Mosquito was no longer just an experiment or a spy plane. It had become one of the most dangerous weapons in the Royal Air Force. What started as a strange wooden idea was now flying over German cities. Fast, fearless, and deadly. The Germans didn't know what to do about it. The Mosquito flew so fast that almost nothing in the Luftwaffe could catch it. Even their best fighters, like the Focke-Wulf Fu-190, struggled to match its speed. It was lighter, smoother, and powered by those two strong Merlin engines that pushed it over 400 miles per hour. At the time, that made it one of the fastest planes in the sky. German pilots tried to chase it, but many returned angry, empty-handed, and embarrassed. Some never returned at all. At first, the Mosquito's main job was taking pictures, flying high over enemy territory to capture photos of military bases, supply lines, or factories. These missions were dangerous, but the Mosquito made them look easy. It would fly in, snap the photos, and leave before anyone even noticed. No fighter, no guns, just speed. But the British quickly realized something. If this plane could get in and out so easily, why not give it bombs? So they did. They took out any extra equipment, stripped the plane down to its lightest form, and turned it into a fast bomber. It couldn't carry as much as a Lancaster or Halifax, but it could hit specific targets with incredible precision. Where other bombers dropped hundreds of bombs over large areas, the Mosquito dropped a few bombs in the exact place they needed to land. And it did it in broad daylight. German guns didn't have time to react. It was in and out too fast. But that wasn't the end of its transformation. They added weapons to its nose, 4 20mm cannons and 4 303 machine guns, and turned it into a fighter. Now it could shoot, too. It started flying low across enemy roads, shooting up supply trains, convoys, and even ships along the coast. This version, the FB Meke 6, became a nightmare for German soldiers on the ground. The Mosquito would appear suddenly, loud, fast, and already firing. By the time anyone reacted, it was gone. But the most feared version of all was the night fighter. British engineers installed powerful new radar into the Mosquito. This radar helped pilots find enemy aircraft in total darkness. The Mosquito could now sneak through the night sky, completely unseen, and strike German night fighters before they even knew it was there. German pilots were trained to hunt bombers. They used radar to track big, slow planes made of metal. But the Mosquito was different. Its wooden body didn't reflect radar well. It looked like a bird, a glitch, or nothing at all. The Germans couldn't understand what was happening. Night after night, their planes were being shot down. But not by huge bombers or squadrons of Spitfires. They were being taken out by a ghost, a wooden plane they could barely see, hear, or detect. The Mosquito didn't just fight. It haunted. It flew alongside German fighters in the darkness, silently, then opened fire at close range. It struck like lightning, fast, deadly, and unexpected. It made even experienced pilots afraid to fly. Luftwaffe commanders were furious. How could a wooden plane built in Canada be beating them in the skies over their own country? They blamed radar, blamed the weather, blamed bad luck. But the truth was simple. They had underestimated the wooden wonder. By late 1942 and into 1943, German commanders were getting desperate. Their pilots were being hunted in the night by something they couldn't see, couldn't catch, and couldn't understand. They kept asking, how can a wooden plane do this much damage? The Mosquito wasn't just flying fast anymore. It was breaking the rules of air combat. And the Germans were starting to realize it wasn't a fluke. It was a new kind of warfare. You see, the German air defense system was built around radar. Big metal bombers showed up clearly on their screens. Even before pilots saw them, radar stations had already spotted them. But the Mosquito? It barely showed up at all. Its wooden body gave it an incredibly low radar cross-section. Radar beams bounced off metal easily. But with wood, they just disappeared. The Mosquito was almost invisible on radar. It didn't need special stealth paint or secret shapes. It was just naturally hard to find. To German radar crews, the Mosquito looked like a mistake, just a flicker, a little blip, sometimes nothing. That tiny radar signature gave the Mosquito a massive advantage. While the Germans scrambled to find it, it was already dropping bombs, shooting down fighters, or flying away to safety. And it wasn't just the radar. The plane's engines ran smooth and quiet, especially at high altitudes. Many German pilots reported being attacked by a Mosquito without ever hearing it coming. It flew with a kind of silence that was chilling, appearing only when it was too late. Then came a new tactic: intruder missions. Mosquito pilots started flying deep into Germany, not just to bomb targets, but to hunt German night fighters at their own airfields. They waited near runways in the dark, and when German planes came in to land, the Mosquitoes struck. Quick, deadly, gone. They'd also catch fighters as they were taking off, engines still low, pilots just lifting off the ground. In some cases, the Mosquito would follow a German plane all the way home and shoot it down during landing. These were cold, clever attacks designed to wreck the enemy's confidence. And it worked. German morale started to crack. Their best pilots were being lost. Fuel was being wasted. Every time they chased a Mosquito, they risked everything for nothing. Some Luftwaffe squadrons began calling it Mosquito Madness. They reported strange radar blips, phantom enemies, and attacks that seemed impossible. Some commanders even believed the British had developed a new kind of radar jamming device. But they hadn't. The truth was simpler and more painful for German pride. It was just wood and glue. And brilliant design, Canadian factories were still building more Mosquitoes. In fact, by now, Canada had become one of the main producers of the aircraft. Their workers knew how to work with wood better than anyone. Cabinet makers, boat builders, and carpenters all joined in the war effort. One strange twist? The Mosquito was easier to repair than metal planes. If a bullet tore through it, you didn't need welding tools or special metal parts. A skilled carpenter with some glue and clamps could fix it in the field. This meant mosquitoes spent less time in repair shops and more time in the sky, doing what they did best, terrifying the enemy. By the end of 1943, the Germans were no longer laughing at the wooden toy. They were losing aircraft, pilots, and control of their own skies. And the Mosquito wasn't done yet. By the end of 1943, the de Havilland Mosquito had proven it could do just about anything in the sky. It could fly fast. It could fight. It could spy. It could bomb. And now, it was doing something even more dangerous. Daylight attacks deep inside Nazi territory. Most bombers flew at night. It was safer, harder to spot, harder to shoot down, but not the Mosquito. It was so fast, so quiet on radar, and so accurate that British commanders began sending it on pinpoint raids in the middle of the day. These weren't big bombing runs with hundreds of planes. These were surgical strikes, just a few mosquitoes flying low and fast, aiming at one very specific target. One of the most famous of these missions was Operation Jericho. In early 1944, dozens of members of the French resistance had been captured by the Gestapo and locked inside a prison in Amiens, France. Many of them were about to be executed. The British were desperate to free them. But how? A ground rescue would take too long. A heavy bombing would kill the prisoners. They needed a perfect, small, fast strike to blow a hole in the prison wall and allow the resistance to escape. So they called in the Mosquitoes. On the morning of the attack, Mosquito crews flew in low, so low that the tips of their wings were almost brushing the trees and fences. They dropped specially timed bombs that hit just the right spots: the outer wall, the guardhouse, and the gate. They didn't hit the prison hospital. They didn't hit the cells. They didn't hurt the prisoners, and then they flew away before the Germans could respond. The prisoners escaped. The mission was a success, and once again, the Mosquito proved it could do the impossible. But that wasn't the only time. Another bold mission took place in Oslo, Norway, where the Gestapo had its headquarters. The Mosquitoes flew across the sea, under the radar, and dropped bombs directly on the building, in broad daylight, with deadly precision. Later, they did the same in Copenhagen, Denmark. These attacks weren't just military. They were psychological. They told the Nazis and their allies, "You are not safe, not even in your offices." These were buildings full of secret documents, informants, and records of the resistance. When the bombs hit, the Nazis lost more than just walls. They lost control. They lost fear power. And they lost face in front of the people they were trying to rule. The Germans were furious and humiliated. They called the Mosquito the paper plane from hell. It was made of wood. It looked like nothing special, and yet it was doing more damage than some of the most advanced aircraft in the war. Pilots trying to catch it started reporting a strange feeling: panic. They would scramble into the air, chase a radar blip, and find nothing. Or worse, they'd hear cannon fire from behind and see a flash of silver wings before their plane was torn apart. The Mosquito was turning the Luftwaffe's defenses into a mess. Radar crews were second-guessing every blip. Fighter squadrons were wasting time and fuel chasing shadows, and the Allies were laughing. The Mosquito had become more than a plane. It was a symbol of clever thinking, of speed, of silent power. A wooden plane that could fly into the heart of Nazi Europe, strike without warning, and disappear before anyone could react. And every time it returned to base, it carried not just victory, but proof that smart design could beat brute force. And it still had more roles to play. By the start of 1944, the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, was in serious trouble. They had been trying for over 2 years to stop the Mosquito. But no matter what they did, the wooden plane kept coming. Faster, smarter, deadlier. Every time they thought they had a new strategy, the Mosquito changed its tactics. And now, it was everywhere. It wasn't just a bomber. It wasn't just a fighter. It was both, and more. There were now many versions of the Mosquito flying different missions all over Europe. Some carried bombs, others carried cameras, some carried guns, and some did everything at once. This one plane was now doing the work of 4. German commanders began using a new term: Mosquito panic. Their pilots hated chasing them. Radar crews hated tracking them. No one could sleep well knowing that this silent, fast ghost of a plane could strike at any time. Every time a German fighter took off to chase a Mosquito, it was wasting precious fuel, and they didn't have much left. And if that fighter got shot down by a Mosquito night fighter, that was one more loss the Germans couldn't afford. And still, the wooden plane kept coming. It wasn't just Britain building them now. Canada had become a major production hub for Mosquitoes. In cities like Toronto and Montreal, small shops and factories worked day and night. Cabinet makers, boat builders, and furniture makers, all of them had joined the war effort. And they were good at it. Canada's forests gave them all the wood they needed, and their skilled workers treated each aircraft like a masterpiece. In fact, Canadian Mosquitoes were known for being some of the best made in the world. One of the secrets? The Mosquito was easy to fix. If it got shot or damaged, ground crews didn't need special welding tools or rare metal parts. A carpenter with a bit of glue, some clamps, and a few wooden panels could patch it up in no time. So, while other planes sat in repair bays for weeks, the Mosquitoes were back in the air within days. And the more the Germans tried to stop them, the more they failed. They tried flying their best fighters at night, using radar to spot the Mosquito. But the radar still struggled to find it. It just didn't show up clearly. Sometimes it was mistaken for a bird, or it disappeared from the screen right before an attack. Even the German pilots who managed to see one often couldn't reach it. They described it as a flash of silver that danced in the sky and vanished before they could get a shot off. It was now common for German airfields to get attacked by Mosquitoes at night. They would fly in low, destroy runway lights, fuel depots, or parked aircraft, and then fly out. And they did this with such speed that by the time alarms went off, the wooden devils were already gone. The impact was deep. German pilots were now flying in fear. German radar crews doubted their own equipment, and German cities were under threat not just from massive bomber raids, but from small, fast strikes that came without warning. All this from a plane built out of birch plywood and balsa wood. The Mosquito had taken everything the Germans thought they knew about air power and flipped it upside down. It was the quiet destroyer, the ghost in the clouds, the wooden menace that wouldn't go away. And it was about to push the Luftwaffe into total retreat. By the end of 1944, the German Air Force was no longer what it used to be. The once mighty Luftwaffe was tired, thin, and fighting to survive. Its best pilots were gone. Its fuel supplies were nearly empty. Its radar was outdated. And every time it tried to defend the skies over Germany, the Mosquito was there. Quiet. Fast. And deadly. But the worst part? The Mosquito wasn't just winning in the sky. It was changing the entire balance of the war. Every time a German fighter was sent up to chase one, it was pulled away from protecting the bigger battlefields, places where American B-17s and British Lancasters were bombing factories, railways, and oil plants. Every Mosquito flight weakened Germany's ability to defend itself. And it did it without fighting head-on. That's what made the Mosquito so smart. It didn't need to dogfight or drop hundreds of bombs. It simply outflew, outthought, and outlasted the enemy. Now, Mosquito squadrons were flying into German airspace almost every night. They would bomb radar stations, destroy train tracks and bridges, shoot down German night fighters hunt planes as they were landing, attack communication centers and airfields. The Germans called these missions schräge Taktiken, meaning twisted or strange tactics, because they broke all the old rules of air warfare. And the worst part for the Germans? These weren't huge squadrons. Sometimes just 2 or 3 mosquitoes would strike an airfield, causing chaos and confusion. Pilots panicked. Ground crews ran. Alarms rang. Anti-aircraft guns opened fire, often too late or in the wrong direction. The Mosquito didn't just hit targets, it broke nerves. Inside German cities, people started calling it the Wooden Devil. Children were told stories about a plane that flew too fast to catch. Soldiers whispered about its silent approach in the dark. Some even believed it had special powers, that it couldn't be shot down at all. And still, Canadian factories kept building them. Canada's role in the Mosquito's success had become enormous. By this time, more than 1,000 Mosquitoes had been built in Canada, and each one was a quiet threat flying over Europe. Their parts were easier to make, their bodies easier to fix, and their missions easier to complete because of the simplicity and strength of their design. German engineers kept asking, how can a country using wood and glue beat us with all our steel and science? But the answer was in the air. Speed, silence, surprise, simplicity. The Mosquito proved that it wasn't about building the biggest or the loudest machine. It was about building the smartest one. By early 1945, the Luftwaffe had begun to collapse. Mosquito night fighters were now controlling the skies, not just over Britain, but over Germany itself. Bombers flew safer because of them. Allied fighters had better intel because of them. And German defenses? Weakened by them day after day. Germany had powerful jet fighters like the Me-262, but they came too late and too few. By the time they were ready, the Mosquito had already changed the war. It had punched holes in the heart of Germany's air power, using nothing more than speed, stealth, and Canadian wood. In May 1945, the war in Europe ended. Cities were in ruins, armies were broken, and, in the skies, the roar of engines gave way to silence. But one plane, the de Havilland Mosquito, had earned a place in history unlike any other. It had flown over 39,000 combat missions, served in every major role, and suffered far fewer losses than other bombers. It didn't rely on heavy armor. It didn't need massive formations. It used speed, stealth, and brains. And the world finally understood. This strange wooden aircraft had changed the war. But after the victory parades, the celebrations, and the photographs, the Mosquito faced a quiet enemy: time. Unlike metal planes, the Mosquito was made of wood and glue, materials that don't last forever. Wood cracks, glue dries, humidity and rain eat away at it. While other planes could be stored for decades in hangars, the Mosquito had to be protected carefully or it would rot. So many were scrapped, burned, forgotten. The very thing that made the Mosquito brilliant, its simple materials, was now the reason it disappeared, but not in Canada. In Canada, the workers who had built the Mosquito still remembered what it meant. They hadn't just helped win a war, they had built something the world said was impossible. From their factories came not only planes, but new knowledge, new skills, and a new place in aviation. Canada had proven it could build world-class aircraft, even without steel or fancy machines, just brains, wood, and grit. And the Mosquito left more than just a story. It left a legacy that shaped the future of flight. The Mosquito was one of the first aircraft to prove that being hard to see was just as important as being fast or strong. Its small radar signature, the result of its wooden frame, showed the power of passive stealth long before anyone spoke the word. Decades later, When America built the F-117 Nighthawk and the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, they used radar-absorbing materials and hidden designs, but the Mosquito had already done it, with birch plywood. It also proved something else, that a single aircraft could do many jobs. Before the Mosquito, planes were usually specialized, one for bombing, one for spying, one for fighting. But the Mosquito did everything, and did it better. That idea of a single, flexible, multi-role platform is now standard in modern air forces. But most of all, the Mosquito left memories. Pilots who flew it never forgot the feeling. The way it responded to the controls. The way it climbed through the clouds, leaving enemy fighters behind. The way it flew into danger and back out again. To them, it wasn't just a machine. It was a friend, a shield, and sometimes a lifesaver. Today, only a few Mosquitoes remain, carefully restored by people who still believe in its legend. They rebuild them using the same wood, the same glue, the same techniques from those old Canadian workshops. Each rebuilt Mosquito is a living reminder. A reminder that in war, cleverness beats brute force. That sometimes the best weapon is not the biggest or loudest, but the one nobody sees coming. And that courage comes not only from the pilot in the cockpit, but from the carpenters and craftsmen who build. Something the world underestimates. The Mosquito wasn't just a plane, it was a revolution, with wings made of wood.